today I bring you yet another review that I've been working hard to bring you for quite some time. You see, I've been wanting to do a proper MR2 review video on the channel, well, since my friend Laurie got his. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the tragic tale of Laurie and his MR2, I'll summarize very, very briefly. We bought a dirt cheap one on eBay from the other side of the country, filmed it, go and watch it, it's one of our most popular videos for some reason. Got it home, spent a lot of money getting it fairly right. It was nearly ready, nearly complete, just needed some cosmetic work done, and then it met a tree. And for the last few months, he's been working on another MR2 that he's bought. And only a couple of days ago did he reveal to me the fact that that car is now roadworthy. But in the interim, I got the kind offer from Andrew from Purple Monster TV to come and review his MR2. And although I don't want to upset Laurie in any way by cheating on him with another MR2 owner, this car is so completely different from Laurie's that it seems worth covering both. Now, Laurie's is relatively standard. This one definitely isn't. This is a Rev 5 car, started life as an NA, but has had a fairly significant heart transplant. It's now got the motor from a Rev 3 turbo in it. It's got a few other modifications too, a cone air filter, custom exhaust, which is basically a straight pipe, coilovers that are currently set to absolutely rock solid, a custom extra high rear wing, this white painted turbo intake on the side here, which is standard for MR2 turbos, but of course not standard on an NA. And this paint scheme is actually not a modification. I thought that it was, and Andrew tells me that everybody thinks that. It's called Cosmos Blue and is the original and correct color of this car. It looks awesome. And he's told me many people have tried to buy the car from him and he's outright refused, and I can see why, because it's a very, very striking thing. In fact, we were talking in the pub, drinking Cokes and Diet Coke in my case, in case you're worried, about the MR2 and the fact that 6 or 7 years ago they were everywhere and you could pick up a runner in pretty good nick for basically no money, but now they've pretty much all vanished. So I'm going to do my best today to try and not reduce the population any further. And we've got pretty nice weather actually for what's essentially November, but you can see we've got quite a few hazards around and the roads are still very, very cold, and I don't know this car. Now, as standard, these produce in the sort of mid 200s horsepower wise. This car has yet to be dynoed, but is estimated at somewhere around 300. And given the fact that these are pretty light cars, should make it pretty quick. Now, handling wise, this is an interesting thing. These are very narrow cars. They're not very long. They are very low, so you feel connected to the road. They're very, very sensitive. Now, these are BC Racing coilovers, and over these English country roads, which are pretty bad even by the standards of English country roads, they're quite firm. Now, the car actually picks up very smoothly. I was a bit worried back there that it might have a power spike or something come along, but actually it's not too bad. Now, no modifications have been performed to the standard ECU. And we know it's standard because it still has the 112 mile an hour speed limiter intact. No, I haven't bumped into it, but it is there. Oh, the power's certainly buried up high. Now I come back into a 30 limit. And it's an interesting experience. Actually, for a road like that, this is quite well suited because it's so narrow that when you have people bumming along in their Chelsea tractors, for my foreign viewers, that would be a large SUV, you can get past them, basically. If I went down that road in an R8, I'd be terrified, absolutely terrified. Now the car has standard seats in it, which are starting to show their age. So this car has 140,000 miles on it, the engine an unknown number. I think Andrew will be the first person to admit that this is far from a show car. This is his daily driver, and as such it is an ongoing project, as all good 1990s Japanese performance cars should be. The gearbox, with the exception of third, is actually very light and easy to use. The clutch action is very, very predictable, more predictable than a lady and an Audi 4x4, that's for sure. But third sadly does crunch a bit. Oh, but not there, so there we go. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Who knows? That exhaust, apparently, under the right circumstances, will produce flames. Whether it will today or not, I couldn't tell you. It's very, very bouncy in here. I think I would definitely back the suspension off a little bit and toy with it, because it does move around quite a bit. The lovely thing with lighter cars is that you don't need a super stiff suspension, because it basically isn't going to be subject to the same sort of forces that, you know, a heavy car is going to put on its suspension components. But it's actually a very, very drivable car. Now, when you're doing this kind of conversion, I'd say it'd be very, very easy to go a bit silly and start putting bigger turbos, doing all sorts of things on it. Now, apparently the stock ECU leaves you essentially zero room for any tomfoolery, so the next stage in this car's build is going to be an Apexi ECU or something along those lines. Unfortunately, in keeping with the JDM tradition, performance parts for these cars are quite expensive. One of those ECUs being a 4-figure purchase, so that may have to wait a little while. I'll admit, I had grave concerns, shall we say, about the concept of a turbo MR2, because I've driven lorries, old one, which was the Rev 1, having only about 150 horsepower, and I thought that that was probably adequate for this car. And the idea of a turboed version, which might, you know, spring a load of power upon you at any point in time, didn't really fill me with confidence. And for that reason, I said to Andrew, look, if it rains today or anything, I'm not coming. But fortunately, we have been blessed with lovely weather, which I am really able to enjoy thanks to the T-bar roof here. Now, I've kept it on simply because it makes sound a little bit better, so it improves the video for you guys. But the great thing is that with the little protective covers off, it's like a greenhouse in here. It's great. Now, visibility out the back isn't great. You can see out the back fine, you know, if there's cars and things there, but for reversing, it's actually quite difficult to place the rear of the car. With a little bit of practice, you of course get used to it, and the rear view is somewhat dominated by the enormous Purple Monster branded spoiler. Speaking of Purple Monster, that is Andrew's channel on YouTube. I'm sure he'd appreciate a couple of extra views thrown his way, and he talks about his trials and tribulations with this very interesting little car. I gotta confess that when I saw the pictures of the car and saw the videos and things, I thought that it would be a somewhat less refined experience, but actually it's really not. The suspension is the only thing letting it down, and the lovely thing is that that BC setup is adjustable, so it doesn't need to do this to you all the time. Modified brethren, yeah, no love. The car's not even that noisy when you're inside it. I stood next to it while he was manoeuvring it in the car park for our exterior shots, and it was loud, the sort of car that I thought, well, on the move, that's not going to be any fun, but actually it's not that antisocial at all in here. So, is this car much of an Elise contender? Well, no, not really. They're very, very different cars. Of course, they exist in completely different price brackets. What you would pay for the ropiest of Elises is what people would ask for the most pristine, amazing, concours winning of MR2s. So that's a very unfair comparison, but I can see why people would make the comparison nonetheless. The ingredients are there. Two-seater, mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, lightweight sports cars with engines available from Toyota. But in truth, the 2 is much better at being a GT car. That's something that the Elise simply can't do, even in its most modern, lovely, soft and cosseting versions. The Elise is no long distance car. Mine had no sound deadening and a silly exhaust, and granted, there are much better ones out there than mine, but in an Elise generally, I have about an hour of fun. That's kind of it, then I'm done. I've done journeys of several hours in MR2s quite happily, and I'm currently planning a visit to Scotland with Laurie in his, and the idea of driving 600 miles in a day in one of these, well, that's perfectly doable. Okay, anyway, enough of my bickering. Let's let the car do a little bit of talking. Certainly shifts. It also shakes quite a bit. It's an odd one really, because it doesn't give you the sort of mid-range punch that you'd expect from a turbo car, not after driving a lot of modern ones, and I get the feeling that this setup has an awful lot more to give. Whether it actually is around 300 horsepower, I couldn't say. It's definitely over 250. It's a nippy car, but I guess really the MR2's problem is it is so refined that it actually masks its speed quite well. When the turbo's lit, throttle response is perfect. And it's actually a much, much friendlier car to drive than I thought it would be. Other than the fact it's got the built-in massage wheel, it's pretty nice. I gotta say, I'm surprised by it. I thought it would be actually really different in character to Laurie's car, and although it is, that's coming almost exclusively from the suspension, nothing else. It's just a faster version of Laurie's car, and that's not entirely a bad thing. Cars have a reputation, the regular MR2 has a reputation that, as far as I know, is well earned for not being the easiest of cars. But this is fine. This is absolutely fine. So there you go. Toyota MR2 Turbo. Is it a budget Elise? No. Is it a good car? Yes. It's something quite different, and truthfully, I can't really think of anything else that's quite like it. And for a mass-produced car, that's quite impressive. I'm no doubt missing something really obvious. There's probably going to be a car out there that's really quite similar to this, but for the money, I can't think of it. So, there you go. Thanks to you guys for watching. Thanks to Andrew for bringing his lovely car out. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Please hit like if you have. Hit like if you haven't. Anyway, it makes me feel better about myself. And if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing. It makes a big difference. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.